Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Cindy Daychuck with Queen Bee Creations. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't already hit subscribe, I would love it if you would do that before you go. We post at least twice a week with different crafts and different projects that we're engaged in. And today's project is all about this chair. Now this is kind of like a bar chair, right? It's got the leather seat, nice wood, it's nice and solid. And I picked it up from Value Village for, I think, $6. Wait, 30% off. So yeah, maybe $4. It's got tons of life left in it. It just needs to be gussied up a little bit. And I thought I would do some fun stuff with this, but we are going to start by painting it all black. Now I've already cleaned it all down, so it's all been washed. Y'all don't need to see me do that. And to do that, I used Dawn detergent mixed with some water to be able to break down any of the oils and things that are on there. I then rinsed it with water. It's all dry and it's ready to take paint. And I'm going to be using DIY paint from Debbie's Design Diary in Little Black Dress. So I am going to paint the entire thing, including the leather seats, which may or may not be real leather. I don't know. But either way, I'm painting it. I'm painting the whole thing black to start, and then we'll start adding in a little bit of color. And there's no magic to this. DIY paint, which is a clay-based paint, is going to stick to all of it. Now, I'm expecting to do 2 coats. I definitely will not need more than 2. I can see the paint going on beautifully already. And because this is a dark color going over a dark base, it's really going to give awesome coverage. And you can see I haven't re-dipped my brush. I mean, I'm already getting awesome coverage. It's going far. And yeah, I just may need 1 coat and some touch-ups. We'll see. So I'm just going to be carrying on, painting the whole thing. So legs, arms, seat, everything in black. And I'll come back at you when that's done for the next step. I have put 2 coats of the DIY Little Black Dress on this piece. And what I have done is I have lightly sanded it. Now I was using 320 paper and I just kind of lightly sanded it to just knock back any little rough spots so that it was a little bit smoother to the touch. And then, sorry, just sitting on it, I just wiped all that dust away. What I am looking at doing before I move on, we're going to do some more painting on this, but I do anticipate that with the next layers of painting, I am going to have to again do a light sanding. And what I don't want, one of the colors is going to be white, I don't want that sanding to then kind of merge in with some of the black and make everything kind of gray or make this look like a chalkboard. So I'm going to seal this before we continue with any of the other painting. And for that, I'm going to use DIY Big Top. And I am just going to use a sponge brush that I have here to apply it just in nice, light, kind of even coat. So I just need 1 light little coat over everything so that as I go to add more paint later, that when I go to sand some of that paint, and again, it's not going to be a major sanding job, but just very light. But as I go to do that, I don't want any of that paint to kind of merge in and change the color of my black. I want my black to look black. So all I am doing at this stage is I'm just going to be applying my Big Top, my top coat, over top of all the painted surfaces of this chair. So just nice, smooth, even strokes. Get some of it on there. We'll obviously be putting more sealer on later. So this is just acting as a little bit of a barrier. So nothing that I have to agonize over, but I just want to get a nice coating on this. So I'm going to get that on. I'm going to let it dry fully overnight, and then we'll come back and we'll move on to some more of the painting that we're going to be doing on this piece. Now that our chair has been sealed, it's time to tape off our stripes. And to do that, I typically measure out the middle and do one stripe right down the middle. And then to keep the other stripes in alignment, so even if this isn't absolutely perfect, as long as the others kind of work off of it, it will seem perfect when it's done. So one of the things that I do is I take extra little pieces of tape, and you can see that I'm doing some slightly thicker stripes rather than little thin ones. But I take a couple of pieces of tape for distancing, and that allows me, excuse me, to then line up my next stripe. So I use the edges of this tape as a guide for where that next piece of tape is going to go. And then I just move them over and I carry on. Now, if I find that it gets too weird over here, then I may change out the placement of my stripes, or I may decide to make it slightly narrower perhaps, or a little wider. But I typically start with what I've got in terms of the tape widths, because then it makes life easier before I complicate it. And I see how it turns out, and I go from there. You can see that I'm pushing this into the cracks. The other piece that I will go back and do is I will then put a little piece of tape running along these edges where I'm going to paint, so that when I do paint, I'm not taking my stripes down onto the base, which I don't want. I want to paint the seat. I am also, there's a little section of the chair that's kind of this half moon up here. It's got an indent. I'm also going to stripe that off. The only thing that I'm going to try and do is kind of line it up with this so that it doesn't look too weird once it's all done. So I am just going to carry on doing my taping, and then I'm going to come back to you when I start the painting, because there's a couple of tricks that I want to show you to ensure that you get nice, tight, crisp lines. No bleeding. So we'll come back as soon as the taping's done, because this is just tearing and sticking. We've got our chair all taped up. I'm just checking some of the last of the little seams, make sure all those little edges are pushed down. Now, I'm going to be doing white stripes on this. Before I do the white, there's an important step I need. What I don't want is to go through all this trouble of laying out all my stripes and then having them bleed, which means that I get the white paint seeping underneath my tape and I don't end up with nice crisp lines. Most paint is going to bleed under the tape, and not all tape is going to be able to stop that from happening. And I don't care how good your tape is, there's going to be some seepage. So there's a little pro tip here. What you want to do is you want to actually paint in where the white is going to go with the base coat or a clear coat. So because I've already clear coated this, I'm just going to use my big top again. So you can use either the base color or you could use the clear coat. And what it does is it means that something's going to seep, and it's going to be something that you don't see. The white would definitely show in contrast, but if I was painting with the black would seep and then I wouldn't see it. or in this case, my clear is going to seep and I'm not going to see it. So all I'm looking at doing is painting that clear coat down over those lines again, so that I'm just getting that part seeping down into those cracks. So I'm just going to do this. We want it to seal up, so I need to wait for it to dry before I come back and start painting in those lines in my color. So I'm going to be using white on this, and I'm just going to need this to dry fully before I start adding in my white. Now that we're all dry again, the next step in the process is to paint our stripes white. Now I'm using beadboard from DIY Paint. Use the white of your choice, but I love this coverage. Now, because we're going over black, expect that you're going to have to do a couple of coats of this. Definitely 2, and even possibly 3 coats. It's really just dependent upon the coverage. And we're just gonna get the paint on, get those stripes painted when I have the coverage that I'm looking for. So whether it's a 2 or 3 coats, I am going to let that final coat almost dry, but I do like to remove my tape before it's fully dry. I just find that it's easier. And I'll come back at you at that point to see what we're seeing with the stripes, but there's a couple of little tips on removing it. So easy process, just painting the stripes. And the one thing that I don't do is brush against my tape line. So brush a nice strokes down, brush inward, but don't brush against them. And that also helps with ensuring that you're not going to get any paint that's seeping underneath. So again, just helping you get nice clean stripes. So I'm going to carry on with painting. I'll get 2 or 3 coats on. We'll see how it goes in terms of coverage. Right now it's looking like 2 coats is going to do it, but I'll get those on and we'll see, and then I'll come back at you for the tape removal, and then we can move on to our next step. Well, I mistakenly deleted or failed to record my removing the big stripes on the chair, the tape. But I just wanted to let you know that whenever possible, if you've got your paint still slightly wet, it's the best time to be removing your tape, just because it hasn't fully set. You're not going to be peeling any of that completely dry paint up with the tape. In addition, whenever possible, try and peel your tape toward the wet side. So rather than peeling the tape toward whatever the dry section is, peel it toward whatever the wet paint is, and that will as well help keep the paint on that side of your project. Our chair has had a chance to dry overnight, and so the next couple of steps, pretty easy. I have some 320 grit sandpaper, so extra fine sandpaper, and all I'm looking at doing is, because right now, if you feel this, there's a lip on that edge, and so all I'm looking at doing is sanding very gently up that side, and that just kind of knocks that lip back so it's nice and smooth, and we don't have any issues. So I'm going to sand this. I'm going to take a dry cloth and wipe it down. This is one of the reasons why we sealed the black first, so that it didn't become gray with this sanding. So I'm going to sand just those edges, knock back a little bit of that paint edge, smooth it out, wipe it down with a dry cloth, and then I'm going to seal the white with our big top again. So before I move on to the next step, I want the piece all completely sealed. So I'm going to just sand these edges, wipe the dust away, seal them with the big top, let it dry fully, and then we come back again. Okay, so this is looking cute, kind of awesome. I may be adding some gold to it. I don't know, we'll see. But I want to do the next step first, and then that'll help me determine what else. And that is going to be adding a transfer. Now, typically, we don't add transfers onto the seat cushions. We'll maybe add them to the back of furniture, just so that when people sit, it's not going to be cracking. But if you see, this seat cushion is not really a cushion. It's leather covered, but it doesn't have a lot of give. So I'm trying it out. I think it'll be the same pretty much as if we just transferred directly onto wood, which I've done successfully on chairs, and people can sit on them once they're sealed, no problem. This is a piece of a really old transfer that I had that was just hanging around. So I'm thinking that'll be fine. Rather than kind of going and opening a new one, we'll just go with what I got open. So I just want to sort of lay it out with an idea of where it's going to be positioned. Now you'll see that I've got some leaves that go down over the sides. Potentially, maybe this flower drops down a little bit. Maybe we'll move it down a little bit more. And I'm cool with that. I like that look. And I like the idea of it going over the black and white, and this is clear in between. So yeah, so it should look good. And then these match up. So what I'm going to do is peel away the backing, and let me just maybe put my stick roughly here so that I get an idea of kind of how low I wanted it. I'm going to peel away the backing. And then lay it down. You guys are going to get my back here for a second. That looks good. Because since we've sealed this, once I put it down, it was going to get stuck. So this is going to be taking the same little tool. This is going to be the same as rubbing it onto furniture or onto anything else. We are just going to rub until that transfer releases from that plastic backing, right? And you can kind of lift up a little bit here and there just to see how it's going and make sure you've got all the details coming off. Perfect world, this all adheres really well. But sometimes maybe it's particularly humid out. Maybe in this case, your transfer has been sitting around for 3-4 years and maybe left in questionable condition. Or maybe you just put your sealer on and it's dried to the touch, but it hasn't dried all the way and you got a little excited to continue on. And it doesn't all lay down perfectly. Like here, you can see that this little piece up here is raised. So when that happens and it's kind of lifting your paint up, take a bit of your sealer. I'm using my Big Top, and I'm putting some Big Top underneath. So ideally, the transfer should stay down, but sometimes there's some conditions where it just starts lifting your paint, or you end up with this piece that just doesn't stay down properly, in which case, take your paintbrush, take some either decoupage medium, or you might as well just use your sealer and take it under whatever those little flaps are, and in essence, you are gluing it down. right? So I've done hundreds of transfers, and this is the second time that I've ever had to do this. But I didn't want to just fix it off camera. I wanted to show you that, like I get anxious and excited to be doing this stuff sometimes way too soon too. Or again, sometimes you have a really old transfer. It happens. So as I went to fix it, I wanted to pop on and be able to show you. So now that I've done that, let me put the lid on this before I knock this entire thing all over, which I have done before. Okay, and we'll see how this last piece goes. So this last piece here, better camera angles of the chair than me, and that's the more important part. We are just looking at lining this up, and you can overlap it slightly if you'd like, so that you don't have a bare kind of line showing, because it will stick on top of the other transfer. But I'm just going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to go over this, get it to release, and if there happens to be any little pieces that don't want to stick, I'm going to use that same trick. So I'm going to attach this. I'm going to look for a couple of small flowers to put up there, and then it all gets sealed again. So I'm going to use the same big top, and I'm going to go over all of the transfer to make sure that it's sealed over the top of the transfer so that it's all well protected. Okay, and you can see that releasing. Once I've got this all done, I will be taking a piece of the paper and rubbing it all down in there, nice and smooth, before I do my sealing, just to make sure that it's all burnished down in there and it's all adhered as well as I possibly can. We're in the final stages of working on our chair. Now, I have sealed this with one coat of my sealer, and I will go ahead and add an additional coat once I'm done over the entire piece, just for a little bit of extra. But I have decided that I'm going to add a little bit of gold to it as well. And I was just checking my colors, and so I have like Rub and Buff in a gold leaf, I have Rub and Buff in an antique gold, but I have elected to use any Sloan bright gold. And all of these products work the same. They come in a little tube, they are like a really fine paste, and I simply use my fingers. So I put a little bit of a dab on, and where I want it, I just kind of rub my finger around on that section. So I'm not looking for something that's perfect and that's exact, but I am looking for getting just a little bit of color here and there to highlight some of the details on the piece. And you'll see I'm using a different finger now just because the other finger still has a lot of the gold on it. But can you guys see that? Let me show you. So you can see two spots where I've added the gold so far. And it's just going to add a little bit of detail. I've got the fancy legs. I've got, some of the details here. It's just going to add a little something. I will say this. Once you start doing this on your piece of furniture, you start to get a little bit addicted to it. So start with the really obvious spots that make sense to do it, and then step back and see whether or not you need more. Because otherwise you start going, oh, I would like it on this rim, and I'd like it over here, and I'd like it, and then it's too much. So I tend to go for some of the really obvious spots like these, highlighting some of these details on the chair, legs, and all of those kind of rounded sections. and then step back and take a look, because otherwise you start going crazy with every edge that there is and you've overdone it. It happens. I've been there. But I'm just looking at kind of making a few of the little details pop, just adding a little bit more interest than just the plain black without it becoming way too much, because we've got a lot of detail here in terms of the chair. So I'm going to finish that off and then I'll take some pics for you, but in essence we are done. Now I will say this, because this doesn't have a lot of give, I'm finding that I think that the transfer is going to be fine. I'm going to put that second coat on though, just so that I have some additional protection on it. But I have done the sit on it and wiggle around test a couple of times, and so far so good. So I think it's going to be fine. If this was a cushion with a lot of give though, I don't think it would be a good option to do the seat. I think then I would have a lot of cracking. But I think this is just a really fun, cute, kind of quick way of really dressing up what started off being a kind of a brown, ugly chair, but in great shape and nice and solid. So, yeah, you get brand new use out of something that it was at the Value Village for really cheap. So, not a lot of money spent on it, but I'm loving it. Hope you give this a try if you've got some old ugly chairs that just need a little bit of revamping, or I hope that just learning some of the tricks with some of the stripes or different way that you could be using a transfer kind of spurs you and inspires you to give it a go and take a look at an old piece that you've got hanging around that you can just kind of zhuzh up a little bit and give new life to. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you learned something along the way. I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, take care.